There's been a lot that's been said through the years about tithes and offerings. And we've heard a lot. I've shared a lot through the years. I think I began my journey in giving more under compulsion, maybe even more out of fear. I need to do this. I need to give God 10% so that He's pleased with me. And you know now, and I know now, that's not the grace message. That's not the understanding. There's nothing I can do that will make God love me more. He loves me for who I am, where I am. But I've given all my life to Him. And so as I begin to understand tithing, I want to take a few moments just to talk about it as I begin to understand it. Some used to say to me, well, Dwayne, tithing was in the Old Testament. It was under the law. We live in the New Testament. You heard that before? Yeah, we do live under the New Testament, right? Jesus said the law came through Moses, but grace and truth came through Him, right? That's the words of John about Jesus. So the reality is we do live in the New Testament. But tithing came about before the Old Testament. In fact, the first place we find tithing was Abraham brought of his spoil, of all of his increase, 10% to Melchizedek. And he gave a tithe as an honor unto the Lord to Melchizedek. Now, the scripture says in Hebrews, he had no lineage, he had no beginning of days, no ending of days, no father, no mother. Many believe, and I know that it can be controversial, but many believe that Melchizedek was Christ in the Old Testament. And so the reality is we see Abraham saying, God has given me, and I think that's the first thing is stewardship. God has given me this increase. And so I acknowledge God by trusting Him with the first 10%. In other words, I don't go spend 60, 70, 80, 90%, try to hold on to the 10. I used to do that. Tithing came last and we'd never have enough to tithe. But when I begin to put first fruits, as it's called in the Old Testament, I begin to give of the tithe first, God continued to bless the rest. And we recognize that it was out of an act of stewardship, out of an act of humility, and it was just out of a heart that says, I want to return to God who gave to me. So it happened before the law. So I like to say it this way. Abraham commenced it. He began this understanding of tithing. Then we find under the law that Moses commanded it. In fact, he would say things like, if you don't give that tithe, if you don't give every 1 out of every 10 of the cattle, then you're going to have to give me 2 or 3 of the next one. In other words, there was a finding process under the law that said if you don't give 10%, it's going to cost you 20, it's going to cost you 30%. So we see it before the law. We see it commanded in the law, right? Now, how many know under the command, it can be done externally, but not internally with the heart? I like to say it in this way. The Old Testament was external. The New Testament became internal, right? In Matthew 5, in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus said several times there, you have been told, or it has been said, right? It has been said, do not kill. But I say to you, whoever's angry with your brother without a cause has already committed a murder, right? Which is harder, not to kill, external, or not to be angry internally. Jesus always brought it to the heart of the matter, and He did the same thing in the New Testament. In Matthew, I believe it's chapter 23, Jesus said, hey, you scribes and Pharisees. Now, He was pointing out their hypocrisy because He said, you pay tithe even down to the spices, but you have omitted the weightier matters of the law. So Jesus said, listen, tithing is not the weightier matters of the law. He said, these you should have done. So He commends tithing and not to leave the others undone. It's just money. And there's not going to be any money in heaven, but it is a stewardship principle on earth. And so it really is about, listen, Abraham commenced it. Moses commanded it, and Jesus commended it. He said, you should do this. I have found in my own life that money is never, the giving is never an amount or an event, but it's a lifestyle that emanates from the heart. If I truly recognize all the beautiful things and the amazing things God has given me, all the income that comes into me, I acknowledge His hand on my life by giving first a 10% back to Him. And the scripture says in Malachi, it's the place where God said, prove me. He said, I will open the windows of heaven. He said, prove me in this tithing. Tithe, and I will open the windows of heaven that you won't even be able to contain the blessing of God. And I have found that to be true, that the blessing of God comes upon me in my giving. God blesses it when I trust him enough to tithe. And so I want to encourage you. Be one of those that says, I want to see an open heaven around my life, around my family, around my children, around all I touch. And that's not just monetarily, that's relationally. I have a rich heritage generationally and legacy in my children who serve the Lord and are in ministry, and my grandchildren who are being raised up to know and love the Lord. That's part of a legacy that I believe has tied to my revelation of seeing an open heaven through giving into the kingdom, you see? And so I've been able now to understand this and live in it and talk to people, not out of saying, hey, we want some of your money. No, it's never the case. We want something for you, not something from you. And so maybe you're someone that says, I'm not planted anywhere yet. You may want to be a part of home church and we welcome you. Maybe you're part of our home church and you're saying, I'm attending regularly, but I really haven't trusted God in tithing. I want to encourage you to do that. Maybe you're one that says, I've always believed in tithing. I've not known where to place my money because I'm not connected yet. I want to tell you, home church is a thriving, healthy, growing network and is a tremendous place to sow seed that would be utilized for the kingdom, and a tremendous place for you to belong as well. But maybe you're saying, well, I've just held my tithe. I've looked for the place. Maybe this is the place for you. But remember, it's not that we want anything from you. It's that we want something for you. God's kingdom is always advanced by generosity. And I have found that generosity is not an amount or an event, but it is a lifestyle of my heart. And I live my life generously in time, talents, and treasures. And so it's exciting to do that. I just thought I would share this with you. So be free. Don't live under the commandment of the Old Testament that says, I got to give something or God won't be pleased with you. No, he loves you immensely, more than we'll ever comprehend in this life. And he couldn't possibly love you anymore. But he wants also to open the windows of heaven blessing upon your life more than you will be able to contain. So God bless you today. I hope this is helpful, beneficial, and makes application to your life.